This week's episode is sponsored by Babysitter Massacre Camp Carnage, the third sleazy slasher book in the Babysitter Massacre series, written by David O'Hanlon and created by me. It's hunting season, and there's no bag limit on babysitters. After his only child dies due to an incompetent sitter, Patton Moore establishes Camp Care. His graduates are highly sought after, and candidates will do anything for a spot. But this time, they'll wish they hadn't. Someone's brought some extra baggage for the stay, and it's up to Macy and the other unhappy campers to figure out who's behind the string of gruesome killings, while being stalked through an unforgiving wilderness full of deadly traps. As the body count climbs, old wounds are torn open, and not everyone is who they seem. Who will survive Camp Carnage? Find it today on Kindle and paperback at Amazon.com.
What's that? You want to be scared? Come with me. You will experience tales of horror, ghosts, and death. It is not recommended for the weak at heart. Listen in the dark. It's more fun that way. This is Weekly Spooky.
Hello, my friends. It's Wednesday, and you know what that means. Time for a little spooky in your weekly. I'm your host and narrator, Henrik Kuto, and tonight we have a bit of a piece of the past. We have a little piece of superstition that many have forgotten, but folks of my generation and the generations before, we never could truly forget it. But before we get to that story, I just want to say a huge thank you to everyone who's been subscribing to the show on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. Please, if you're listening to this and you're not subscribed, get in on that action. It helps us a whole lot. And also a big thank you to our brand new Patreon backers. You guys help us bring the spooky every single week, and I'm very grateful because I love doing it. Also, I just released a brand new episode of Behind the Spooky, the Patreon exclusive podcast where we look at the inner workings of the show, including interviews with authors, composers, producers, and more. And this week's episode features Splatter Joe Salmo, who's written many of the stories you've enjoyed on the show, so you may want to get in on that action ASAP by going to WeeklySpooky.com, clicking on the Patreon link, and helping us out. I appreciate it greatly. But tonight's story, it's another trip to Strickfield, to the universe that author Rob Fields has created on the program. But this time, it's all about something that maybe you remember from when you were young. Whether it was a paper letter coming to you saying it would bring you great fortunes, or terrible sadness if you didn't forward it, or maybe it was sent by an inept aunt in your email box. I'm sure you remember being a part of the chain. Well, what if the innocuous chain letter was co-opted by someone evil? Someone who could actually make good on the promises and threats of the letter. That's what we're about to find out. So without further ado, let's get to the story. Chain Letter by Rob Fields. Prologue. The old man entered his study and slammed a large ancient leather-bound book onto his desk. He opened the front cover and turned page after page until he finally found the one that he was looking for. Yes, this is the one, he hissed to himself. The chain curse is exactly how I'll claim the souls I need to restore my youth and gain my revenge on the town elders who banished me from Strickfield long ago. After reading the instructions, he sat at his desk and opened the top drawer. He pulled out 3 sheets of paper and began to copy the ancient curse, as was written on the book's page, onto the sheets. Upon finishing the letters, he simply folded them and placed them into the envelopes. After writing down a different address on each one, he put the stamps on them. All he would have to do now is mail them out. "Vengeance will be mine," he cried excitedly as he stood up, snatched up the letters, and left for the post office. Charity. Rebecca Mirren opened the mailbox and pulled out a stack of mail. Then she unlocked the front door and went in. "Anybody home?" she called out. When she got no reply, she mumbled to herself, "Guess not." She slipped her shoes off and made her way to the kitchen. She pulled a Coke out of the refrigerator. After cracking it open and taking a drink, she set the can on the counter and began sorting through the mail. Most of it was for everybody else who lived in the house. Then she found the one envelope that was addressed to her, with no return address. Just then, Rebecca heard the front door open, causing her to look up. "Micah, hi, I thought you said you had a cross-country meeting today." Micah Collins laughed a little. "I do, but I forgot my damn running shoes. I'm just coming home to get them and head on back." She saw that Rebecca had sorted the mail. "Did I get anything?" Rebecca handed her her mail. After Micah looked through it, she put it back down on the table. "Nothing interesting?" Rebecca asked, then took another drink of her Coke. Micah shook her head. "Probably just a few catalogs I can look through later." She looked at her best friend. "Are you going to stay home again?" Rebecca shrugged. "I don't have to work today. Maybe I'll just pick up around here." Micah took Rebecca's hand. "You already do enough around here, Becca. Why don't you come to the cross-country meet and watch me? We can go have coffee afterwards." Rebecca really wasn't that big into school sports. Unfortunately for her, she was never good at coming up with lies. She smiled a little. "Okay." Micah gave Rebecca a quick hug. "I love you. You're the greatest." Rebecca hugged her back. "I love you." Rebecca watched Micah running from the sidelines, cheering on her best friend each time she ran by. Rebecca basically did whatever Micah asked of her because it was Micah's family that had taken her in after her parents had kicked her out. While some people considered Rebecca the one Mirren who had fallen from grace by her own family, others called her the one good Mirren. Rebecca was her given name, but when her parents discovered that she was volunteering her time at a homeless shelter in Erie City, they turned on her and ridiculed her. Her own mother scorned her by calling her Charity. The last straw came when her father had seen that she was also volunteering her time at blood drives at Strickfield General Hospital. Micah was volunteering there with her when the big blowout happened. Afterwards, she offered Rebecca a place to stay with her family. Rebecca was reluctant to accept, but ultimately did when she knew that she had nowhere else to go. After she moved in with Micah's family, she got a job as a pizza delivery girl. It wasn't the best job, but the tips were great, and she could contribute something for her keep, at least when Micah's family would let her. After the event was finished, Micah ran to Rebecca and hugged her. "Thank you for coming. I love you." Rebecca hugged Micah back. "It's okay." Micah smiled. "Let's go home. I'll take a shower, then we can go on our coffee date." Rebecca smiled. "Sounds good." As the girls were halfway back to their house, they had some very unwelcomed company. Rebecca bit her lower lip slightly. "What do you want? Why can't you just leave me alone?" "Get the fuck out of here," Micah snapped. The group that had approached them was made up of other Mirrens, Rebecca's siblings and cousins. Tawny, one of Rebecca's cousins, shoved her. "Shouldn't you be working at the hospice, Charity?" Rebecca staggered. Then she yelled, "Leave me alone!" "No, she should be working at that soup kitchen in Erie City," Douglas, her older brother, teased. "Don't you understand, Charity? We're Mirrens. We're above these people. We're the richest and most powerful family in the world. We can do whatever the fuck we want." Brian, Tawny's younger brother, shoved Rebecca this time. "You had the whole world at your feet, and you just threw it away. Who the fuck do you think you are, Charity?" The rest of the Mirrens gathered around Rebecca and started shoving her back and forth among them. Micah tried to save her, but she was finally grabbed and held by Richard. Cynthia and Elizabeth, two more cousins, were taking turns pulling Rebecca's hair as they shoved her. Finally, Douglas grabbed her and threw her to the ground. "Still want to be a bleeding heart, Charity?" Elizabeth asked in a mocking voice. And then Cynthia saw the letter sticking out of Rebecca's back pocket and snatched it. Rebecca turned her head to her sharply. "Give that back! That's mine!" As Rebecca went to get up, Douglas grabbed her and threw her to the ground again. "You fucking pieces of shit!" Micah screamed at them. Cynthia wasted no time in tearing open Rebecca's letter. Then she read the paper. "What the fuck is this?" She turned it to the others. "Hey, everybody, listen to this letter Charity got." She cleared her throat. "You have received this letter, and now you are bound. You will be appointed a task. Failure to execute the task will result in certain death. Upon successful completion of your task, you must forward this letter to another recipient." Cynthia spun around to glare at Rebecca. "Is this some kind of fucking joke, Charity?" Before Cynthia could lash out and slap Rebecca, Tawny got a text message on her smartphone. She pulled it out of her back pocket and read the text. Then she grinned and looked at the others. "Can you believe this shit? I just got a text saying I have to knee one of my brothers in the balls." "Oh, bullshit," Brian scoffed. "Let me see that." Tawny handed him the smartphone. As he took it and read the text, Tawny quickly placed her hands on his shoulders and threw her knee hard in between his legs. Brian cried out and sank to his knees. Tawny just smiled a wicked smile as he held his groin and groaned. Cynthia looked at the letter again and laughed. "Forward this letter to another recipient? Really? Who the fuck even mails letters anymore?" She handed the letter to Tawny. "Here, you better mail this, or else." Then Tawny had quick inspiration and used her smartphone to take a picture of the letter. "I'll send this to my boyfriend. He'll get a kick out of it." And she did. Cynthia crumpled up the letter and threw it at Rebecca. Then another smartphone chime was heard. Brian looked at his phone. "Who the fuck is sending us these texts?" He looked around to see if anybody else was watching. When he didn't see anyone else, he looked at the others. "Mine says I have to punch a relative in the face." Rebecca gasped when he looked right at her. Rebecca tried to break loose, but Douglas held her tight. The next thing she knew, Brian had punched her right in the face, hard enough to both daze her and give her a black eye. Douglas let her go and watched her fall. "You motherfucker," Micah screamed. She tore away from Richard and moved to her friend. "She's your family!" "Let me have that chain letter, Cynthia," Brian instructed. "Here, I'll send it to all of you." Cynthia did. Another smartphone chime later, and Elizabeth had received a text. She laughed as she quoted it. "Beat Micah within an inch of her life." Rebecca had come to her senses enough to where she got up and stood in front of Micah. "No, none of you are touching her." Rebecca gave her a scornful look. "I'm gonna enjoy this." Rebecca pushed Elizabeth and turned to Micah. "Run!" The two girls ran as fast as they could. Rebecca was nowhere near as fast as Micah. It wasn't long before Douglas had tackled her from behind. As Douglas got up, he snatched Rebecca to him and held her with a full Nelson. "Run, Micah, run!" Rebecca called out. Then Elizabeth turned and socked Rebecca in the mouth. "Okay, fine. I'll beat you within an inch of your life instead. We all know you deserve it." Elizabeth continued to punch Rebecca as Douglas held her. "Still want to be a good girl, Charity? Haven't you heard the phrase that nice people finish last?" Suddenly, Elizabeth's head just exploded. Her body twitched for a little bit before it dropped to its knees, fell onto its side, and bled out fast through the open neck. With the exception of Micah, everybody else, including Rebecca, was covered in the splatter of what was once Elizabeth's head. Rebecca's eyes were still wide with surprise. She had been directly in front of her when her head exploded. Realizing that Douglas's grip on her was loose, she quickly pulled herself free and ran. Micah came for her and the two of them ran away, Micah holding Rebecca's hand. Eventually, the two of them made it back home and went inside. Micah locked the front door behind them. Rebecca continued to look wide-eyed. "What just happened back there, Micah?" Micah was still holding Rebecca's hand tightly. "We can talk about it upstairs. Come on. Let's get you in the tub and get you cleaned up." Rebecca mechanically nodded and let Micah lead her upstairs to the bathroom. Rebecca laid on her side on her bed and cried softly as Micah tried to comfort her. "I don't know why you're crying for Elizabeth, Becca, especially with the way she treated you. I can't believe your own family treats you like shit just because you're kind." "They're still my family, no matter what they've done to me," Rebecca replied. "I'm sorry," Micah whispered and held Rebecca. Then, Rebecca's smartphone chimed. Normally, the phone would only chime a few more times for an unanswered text message, but this time, it kept chiming. Rebecca had no choice but to look at her text. Micah let go of her so she could sit up and pick up her message. Rebecca gasped and dropped her phone. "No." When Micah picked up the phone, Rebecca grabbed her hands. "No, please, don't read it." "It's okay," Micah said softly. And she read the text. "Have sex with Micah." Micah's eyes opened wide. Then she looked back to Rebecca. Rebecca held up her hands in front of her. "We don't have to do this, Micah." Micah moved and sat next to Rebecca. "You saw what happened to Elizabeth. She was supposed to beat me up, but she hit you instead. She didn't do what her text said, and you saw how she died for it." Rebecca shook her head quickly. "I won't do this, Micah. You're my best friend and I love you, but I won't violate you like that." Micah took Rebecca's hand. "It's not violating me if I consent to it. If it means saving your life, then I more than consent. I love you too, Becca, and I don't want you to die. When we're done, then you can send the letter off." Tears rolled down Rebecca's cheek. We've been friends for years and I don't want to lose you. You really mean the world to me." "And you me." Micah let go of Rebecca's hand and removed her t-shirt. "I won't let you die. I won't. It's okay. Really." Rebecca closed her eyes and felt Micah's lips on her own. Then they kissed, passionately. Rebecca and Micah got dressed and regarded each other. Micah saw the sad look on Rebecca's face. "Oh, please don't tell me it's weird between us." Then she realized what she had just said. "Yeah, I suppose it is weird between us, isn't it? I'm so sorry." Rebecca reached out and took Micah's hand. "I know you offered yourself to me to save my life. Thank you so much. It's just... What?" "Just say it, Becca," Micah told her. Rebecca leaned in and kissed Micah's lips. Micah looked at her in surprise. "Becca, it's over. You don't have to." Rebecca kissed her lips again. "Oh, Becca, I've loved you for a very long time, Micah," Rebecca confessed. "That's why it was so hard for me to accept your invitation to come and live with you and your family after mine kicked me to the curb. I just wanted you to know how I really feel. She shook her head, slowly. "I just feel so bad that it was under these circumstances." She started crying again. "Please forgive me." Micah eased her arms around Rebecca, and the two of them shared a long, passionate kiss. After they came apart, Micah told Rebecca, "There's nothing to forgive." Suddenly, Micah remembered something. "Becca, you need to forward that letter." Rebecca shook her head. No way. I am not going to pass this off to somebody else. I won't." Micah quickly took one of Rebecca's hands in both of hers. "If you don't, you might die. I don't want you to die." Micah, I appreciate what you're trying to do, but I don't want to pass this off to another person. I'd feel so bad knowing that people would die because I wanted to get rid of this chain letter. But, Becca, you... Micah quickly pointed to her full-length mirror. Rebecca turned to see a message written on it. Kill Rebecca if she doesn't forward her letter. 5 minutes. Micah looked at Rebecca now. Rebecca shook her head slowly. I won't do it, Micah. I won't. I don't want to kill you, Becca, Micah cried. If you don't forward the letter, then we'll both die. Rebecca hugged herself and fell to her knees. Why is this happening to us like this? Why? Micah dropped down in front of Rebecca. Please, just send the letter. She put her hands on Rebecca's shoulder. I don't want us to die. Rebecca really did not want another person to come under the spell of the chain letter's evil that had come into their lives. She really did not want any more lives to be lost as a result. However, their time was growing shorter by the second. Rebecca screamed at the top of her lungs and slowly stood up. She grabbed the accursed letter and screamed at the mirror. I give it to myself, goddamn you! She shook the paper. Give me another task! The television across from the bed suddenly turned on. A news anchor from Channel 8 News from Erie City appeared and was running down the top stories. Then, he gave a top story that was just for the benefit of the girls. Rebecca Mirren tried to avoid passing off the letter as per the instructions. However, her pure and righteous heart accomplishes absolutely nothing here. She must forward the letter to another person, or both Mirren and Micah Collins will die. It's that simple. Rebecca became enraged again. Then kill me! Take my life, but let Micah and the others go. The news anchor spoke up again. Rebecca Mirren has less than a minute to at least make an honest attempt to forward the letter. She needs to move quickly before 2 lives become lost. If she does not forward the letter, all of those who have been entangled by it will die. That means the rest of Rebecca Mirren's family as well. Rebecca roared with rage and was ready to attack the TV, but Micah quickly took her hand. Give it to me. Rebecca turned to her. But if you give me that letter, it not only finishes both of our tasks, but it also gives me another. We get to live. Becca, please. Reluctantly, Rebecca handed the letter to Micah. It's yours. I give it to you. Once Micah accepted the letter, the news anchor spoke again. And now that Micah Collins has accepted the letter, her next task will be to take the baseball bat out of her closet and beat Rebecca Mirren to death with it. The closet door suddenly opened, and the telltale baseball bat flew out and landed precisely in Micah's hands. Rebecca and Micah regarded each other. Then Micah tossed the bat away and said to the TV, Fuck you! Then the TV turned itself off. But Rebecca again remembered Elizabeth's horrible and gruesome death. You have to do it, Micah. You'll die if you don't. Micah now trembled with both fear and rage. She shrieked and moved to the bat. She lifted it in her hands and squeezed it tightly. If I were you, Becca, I'd be running. Now! Rebecca understood at once what Micah's idea was and bolted out of the bedroom. She ran to the stairway and descended the steps 2 at a time. She knew that Micah would soon be right behind her. She bolted right out the front door and leaped off the porch steps. As soon as her feet were on the concrete walk, she took off running. Rebecca knew she would never be able to escape Micah. She didn't know how long Micah would stall in her chase, but she knew she would have to put distance between herself and her new love. Rebecca reached the end of the block, and her stomach dropped quickly. Her estranged siblings and cousins had found her and were pointing right at her, and they looked to be armed with anything that could kill. Douglas pointed right at Rebecca. Looks like it's your day to die, Charity. Cynthia laughed. We all got the same text. We have to kill you, Charity. Rebecca tightened her fists. Why do you hate me so much? I'm out of the family. Isn't that enough? Douglas spoke up. We're sick of hearing about what a goody two-shoes you are. We're sick of hearing about what a bleeding heart you are. You're a fucking Mirren, and you prefer to live like these bottom feeders. Now we can end you, Cynthia purred, just like we've ended so many others who got stupid enough to cross us. God damn it, Becca! Run! Micah yelled as she got closer. We should kill Micah, too, Tawny shrieked with delight. We can't, Brian reminded her. Remember what happened to Elizabeth? Tawny looked pouty. Shit. Then she glared at Rebecca. Kill her! Rebecca turned and ran for all she was worth. She willed her body to give her everything it had. But it was no use. She just wasn't a fast runner. She could hear her hateful, murderous relatives and her new girlfriend chasing her down. None of them could turn on each other. They could only catch up to Rebecca and beat her to death. Rebecca cut through a yard and came very close to falling into an in-ground swimming pool. She quickly turned and kept running. She heard curses behind her as bodies splashed into the pool. I'm right behind you, Becca, she heard Micah call out. Keep running. Suddenly, Rebecca cried out as a sharp pain immediately flared in her side, causing her to fall. Becca! Micah shrieked. She's down, they heard Brian calling. We can kill Charity, now! Micah quickly reached Rebecca. She dropped the bat and extended her hands. Don't worry, I'm just helping you up so I can take your head off with my bat. Rebecca took Micah's hand and groaned through her pain as she was helped to her feet. Micah picked up the bat and raised it to bring it down on Rebecca's head. Rebecca saw her wink. Seeing the provided opening, Rebecca quickly shoved Micah so that she fell onto her back. Run, Becca! Micah yelled. I'll be coming again soon. I may not be able to hold back next time. Rebecca was in a great deal of pain now. She managed to climb a fence to put distance between herself and the others. She cried out as a hard flare of pain hit her as she landed. Still, she forced herself to run. As she was about to make it past a garage, the biggest flare of pain yet had sent her onto her side again. She knew she couldn't run anymore. Rebecca turned and crawled through the garage door's open side doorway. She pulled herself to her feet using a workbench. Then she saw two things that could potentially lead to salvation. A butane torch welder and a spark igniter. She grabbed the items and ignited the torch welder. She held the letter to the flame and watched as it burned. Just then, Micah had again reached her. Rebecca turned to her. I burned it! I burned the letter! Before Micah could react, Rebecca's hateful family was on them. It's too late! Becca burned the letter, Micah told them with a voice of triumph. Brian smiled. Well then. He drew back and cracked Micah's knee with his weapon. Micah cried out, fell onto her side, and held her knee. Rebecca threw herself across Micah to shield her from further harm. The other Mirans started hitting Rebecca. Then Micah forced Rebecca to turn over and got on top of her. The Mirans were beating on Micah now. Suddenly, the two girls heard one scream after another as the hateful Mirans exploded all over them. As Micah felt herself being drenched with blood, she knew that her plan had worked. Like Elizabeth Mirren, the others had not obeyed the letter. As a result, the curse had ended them. Now, it was only Micah and Rebecca. They sat up and faced each other. I stopped them, Becca, Micah said. Rebecca shook her head quickly. But you still have to kill me. She forced herself to get to her feet. Then she faced Micah as she got up. I don't want to kill you, Becca, Micah cried as she stood up. I love you. Tears started rolling down Rebecca's eyes. And I love you, Micah. That's why I have to free you of this letter. Burning it didn't work after all. There can only be one other way. As fast as Micah was on her feet, even she could not have reacted in time to stop Rebecca from picking up a bottle of poison that she had opened prior to the burning of the letter. Micah seemed to move in on even slower motion as Rebecca drained the remainder of the bottle in one gulp. The poison was fast-acting because Rebecca's eyes rolled up into her skull as she slumped to the concrete floor. Rebecca opened her eyes and saw that she was in a hospital room, in a bed. She was wide awake and felt that she had some kind of fantastic new energy. She sat up and saw that Micah was there with her, and holding her hand. Micah? How am I thought I was... You were, Micah confirmed. You were definitely flatlined. You came back just before we reached the hospital. You came back, Becca. Suddenly, Rebecca had a quick realization. You're not dead either. Micah smiled. No, I never exploded or got hurt in any way. I've been here with you the entire time. Mom and Dad are on their way here to make sure you're all right. Rebecca sighed. How can we face your parents after what we did? Micah smiled as she kissed Rebecca's hand. We'll just have to be careful, won't we? I don't regret what happened. We can't undo it, and we can never go back. I love you, Becca. I know you love me. We can be together now. Rebecca squeezed Micah's hand. I do love you, and want to be with you. She smiled. Okay, you're right. We'll have to be careful once I'm out of here. They shared a quick kiss, then Rebecca asked, Can you do me a favor? Micah nodded quickly. Name it. Call me Charity from now on. Micah raised an eyebrow. But your family scorns you with that name. But they're right, Micah. I pretty much do everything for charity, so I'm taking their scornful name and owning it. Besides, I think it has a really nice ring to it. Micah sighed softly. Okay, Charity. And they kissed again. Charity had a sudden realization. Micah, what if there are more of those letters out there? Micah waved her free hand to calm her down. We'll just have to be careful not to open mail or read texts from people we don't know. That and stop people from reading them out loud. Though neither of them wanted to admit it, they both knew, deep down, that this letter that they had experienced was likely not the first, or possibly even the last. Several questions came into Charity's mind. Would they ever encounter another such letter again? Who was evil enough to have conceived and sent the letters out? Why? I have a feeling in the not-too-distant future we're going to find out a lot more about the evil man who's wrought the chain letter hell upon the town of Strickfield. So big thank you to Rob Fields, our resident author and chief creator of the universe of Strickfield, for that great story. I had a lot of fun reading it, and I hope everybody's doing very well. It is yet another month. It's August, and I'm happy to be here. We are inching closer and closer to our big 100th episode. That's right, we've done almost 100 episodes of Spooky on the Weekly, and to celebrate, we're going to be doing a special 2-part episode, about an hour long each, featuring 10 authors. So please be on the lookout for that. That's just 5 weeks away. And also I want to say a humongous thank you to our Patreon backers who are allowing us to keep the show going well beyond 100 episodes. Your support really does mean the world to me. And especially those who got involved and helped me with my veterinary bills. Thank you very much. I hate, just shilling straight up, but I needed help. So thank you so much. Chicano, my rescue dog, he's doing much better. It looks like his heart is overall in good shape, and he's got many years ahead of him. So thank you all again for your help. And speaking of help, a big thank you to our Patreon podcast boosters, folks who pay just a little bit extra to hear their names on the Spooky Show. And that's Gino Lyons, Michael aka Charm, Karen Weemet, Jeff and George Hilton, Craig Cohen, Rob Fields, and Kevin Fry. Thank you all for keeping the Spooky alive. And speaking of keeping the Spooky alive, why don't you head over to Tubi.com and watch a couple of free movies. Just type my name, Henrik Kuto, in and hit search, and you'll find horror movies, comedies, and so much more completely free with just a little bit of commercial interruption. So my name you can find in the show notes, because I know it's a little hard to spell. But anyway, I gotta get out of here. So for myself, for Ray Mattis, our composer, and for my producer, Dan Wilder, stay scared, stay safe, and I will talk at you later.
Thank you for listening. Make sure to find your way back next week. But for now, you are safe. Trust me.